With the 2023 MLS season around the corner, it's that time of year where I get to set up my camera, write a whole script on how I think the season will play out, and sit here and act like I'm some kind of genius who can definitively rank each of the 29 MLS clubs into the exact position they will actually finish in. Sounds like a tall task, but one that I'm up for. So for the third year in a row, here are my MLS preseason predictions. Before we get into the predictions though, let's talk about the format of the league this year. The Eastern Conference has 15 teams and the Western Conference has 14. Previously, the top 7 teams made it into the playoffs, but this year everything's kind of in the air. There's rumors right now that the top 9 teams from each conference will make it into the playoffs, but that hasn't even been announced yet and the season starts in about a week. So for this video, we're going to assume that the top 9 teams are going to qualify for the playoffs. But as you can see over on the table, we have the top 7 in green, and then I have the next 2 in a yellow because I don't know if they're going to technically be playoff spots or not. So anyways, we'll start over in the Eastern Conference. And to keep things moving quickly, as we have 29 teams to cover, let me throw out my bottom 2 teams. Chicago Fire in 15th and DC United in 14th. Honestly, I could see either of these teams swapping around, but for now, this is where I have them. For Chicago, I hate to say it to my Fire fans, but you know this. There's absolutely nothing to look forward to in this upcoming season. Last year, the Kasper Schmeichel train crashed out, and I just don't think Shaqiri is the type of player to revolutionize a side all by himself. With John Duran and Gaga Slonina out too, there seems to be many gaps that weren't really filled in over the offseason. There may be a DP number 9 on the way, but I can't see it changing the fortunes for this Fire team. For DC United, it's a bit of the same. This will be the first full season under Wayne Rooney, and he's been busy in the market, sending off almost half of the roster and bringing in a few names as well. The issue is DC fans have to rely on Rooney's former Premier League brigade, with Benteke up top, Ravel Morrison, and now Matthias Klit joining the ranks. Still though, for those first 2, Benteke and Ravel Morrison, I didn't really see enough in their first half season that made me think that they could carry this team high up the table. To succeed, this team needs to help out Fontes, who basically dragged this team through games after his arrival mid-season in 2022. It's still a work in progress in the nation's capital, which is expected, but I wouldn't count on it coming together this season. Up the table, we see the big drop that I'm calling this year, which is Montreal coming back down to earth. The fact is, this Montreal side is not the same as it was last season. Georgi Mihalovic is off to Holland, Alistair Johnson is in Scotland, young star Ismail Kone is in England now, and the mastermind behind it all, Wilfried Nancy, has left for Eastern Conference foe Columbus Crew. It's a big switch up that takes away some of Montreal's most dangerous pieces from last year. On the bright side, they've retained Victor Wanyama, who's been that controlling force in their midfield for a while now. And they also retain their solid defensive line with the likes of Joel Waterman, Camacho, and Kamal Miller staying. Montreal also has added some guys like Aaron Herrera from RSL, but there's a question up top with Kai Kamara's future in the air after being public that he wants to go, and Mason Toy's inability to be relied on throughout a full season. Also, the hire of Hernan Losada didn't really fill me with that much confidence. It's a big call for them to drop down this far in the table, but it's one that I'm gonna take. In 12th place, I'm putting Charlotte, and let me start this by saying predicting every team is difficult because there are so many decent teams in the league, and that means that some not so bad clubs end up being pushed down further than I really want to. So yeah, technically I'm predicting a step back for Charlotte, but also there were clubs that finished under them last year who I expect to do a lot better. It's gonna be tight in this middle pack for both conferences, so bear that in mind. The issue for Charlotte is that they have a lot of unproven guys who are penciled into their starting lineup. Joe Zwiak, who's a DP, was like non-existent last year, and Swiderski, another DP, would pop off every now and then, but he wasn't consistent at all. And you're telling me that these 2 guys are supposed to take the lead for this team. Charlotte have signed another 3rd DP in Enzo Capetti, but although he's had a decent season for Racing Club in Argentina, it's not like he's a proven top-level talent over the course of multiple seasons. The saying is you're only as good as your weakest link, but for Charlotte, I think they're only going to be as good as their top guys can take them, which is why I have them in 12th. And along those same lines of good teams being towards the bottom of the table, I have Nashville in 11th, and this one hurts because I have been very open with my love for what Nashville has done in MLS. I think they had the perfect blueprint coming into the league, having a wealth of MLS veterans and that splash of magic, but I think that well's run dry. The problem with having this type of blueprint though is that if you don't keep it fresh and updated, your MLS veterans just get to that certain age where maybe their ability is put into question. You saw a bit of that drop last season when they fought through the West, and if it wasn't for Hani Mukhtar's insane run of form for that second half of the season, they probably would have missed the playoffs that season as well. That home field dominance that we correlate to Nashville too is not really there anymore, and with the core of this team being Picault, Sean Davis, Dex McCarty, and Lovitz, I'm worried that there will be more steps back before they flourish again. I mean, with Hani Mukhtar though, anything could happen, but that's a lot of pressure on a guy who's done it almost single-handedly for the last 2 seasons. It's another big call, but I'm saying no playoffs for Nashville SC. Just below this possible playoff line, in a spot that would be disappointing, is the New England Revolution. We gotta realize this Revolution side is not the same that we saw back in 2021. That deadly DP trio is now all but washed away, with Adam Buxa in France, Gustavo Bo possibly out as well, and Carlos Gil being left as the last man standing. Last year, Bruce Arena whiffed on about every single signing he made, and that showed with their 10th place finish. Take for example their DP Giacomo Veroni. We just haven't seen anything since coming in last summer, but you'd like to think that if he gets his chances, that $3.8 million man can do something. The bright spot is that their defensive line is set. Georgi Petrovic is still one of the best keepers in the league, and Kessler, Bai, Jones, and new signing Dave Romney should keep it locked down. But to be honest, I'm just seeing another mid-table team here. I'll say from about Nashville all the way up to my 4th place team, they're all playoff contenders and teams I feel like could go either way of the line. In this case, if we're going by the proposed new playoff rules, that would mean Miami would just make the playoffs in 9th place. What worked last year down the stretch for Miami was the link up of Alejandro Pozuelo and Higuain. But with both out the door, you're left in this limbo with the guy in Leo Campana who has shown bright signs but maybe without that consistency. If Campana can restrike that match that we saw in early 2022 and can hit it off with a partnership with Joseph Martinez, then this club could be great on the attack. But that would also probably require Quarantine, a player who has only made 3 appearances for this club in 2022, to start running almost instantly in this number 10 position that the experts see him penciled in on. If everything works out, I think they'll definitely be fighting until the final day, and right now I have them in 9th. Up in 8th place, I'm putting Toronto FC, and call me crazy if you want, but in my first draft of this conference, I actually had them up in 2nd, which means this team could literally be anywhere. This is an unfinished squad at the moment, but their key pieces are big. You've got Insigne and Bernadeschi, who tore it up after they joined midway through the season last year. And on top of that, if you can keep a healthy Mark Anthony Kaye and Jonathan Osorio, I like how your midfield shapes up. The huge difference between last season and this season though will be the Reds' back line. First off, they picked up a solid keeper in free agent Sean Johnson. This is a signing that I feel like could save them 10 to 15 points just on his own. Along with that, another free agency pickup, Matt Hedges, who led Dallas to the best defensive record in the West last year, has joined this team. With a little bit more presence on the defensive side of the ball and their attacking prowess of the 2 Italian prodigies, the sky's the limit. But for me, I'm gonna say that limit is 8th, even though again, they could be anywhere. Next up, it's a big drop from last year, and I'm locking in NYCFC. The reason for this I put up to a few things. First off, their number 9 position has hung in the balance since Tati Castellanos left last year. No one's been brought in yet, and it looks like they'll move Talis Magno up to that position, which is definitely not where he plays best at. Secondly, their captain, Alexander Collins, a man who had this team on the back towards the end of 2022, is now off to Spain. And lastly, they've traded one of their best goalkeepers in the league for an unproven backup, so yeah, there are things to worry about in the Big Apple. Now it appears they'll hold on to Santiago Rodriguez, who can fill the hole Maxi Morales left, but I wonder how long they're going to be able to have him for. Now there's still time for NYCFC to fill in this squad with some more high-level pieces, but I wouldn't hold my breath on all that being done before the end of this first transfer window. In 6th place, I have the beloved Columbus Crew, a team I could go on and on about, but I'll try to keep it short. The issue this squad has had for the last few years is their resistance to attack. But with Caleb Porter gone, the man who brought in most of that criticism, there's now a chance for a new style of play to emerge. Cue Wilfred Nancy, a manager heading into his 3rd year as a head coach and one who just finished a bright spell with Montreal, transforming their attack and style of play into some of the most entertaining in Major League Soccer. Will he be able to figure out this system with the guys the Crew has? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Cucho Hernandez and Lucas Zelarayan have the potential to be the most electric dynamic duo in the league, but I don't know if it will happen in this first year. I'm also concerned that the Crew are lacking depth just about everywhere. Their wingers don't fill me with confidence, their midfield seems a little light, and the backline is also on the lighter side after letting go of captain Jonathan Mensah a few weeks before the season was set to kick off. The Crew is putting a lot of faith into young players this year, which is something Nancy has had success with before, but will it work? I mean, it could, but it also couldn't. I'm worried and excited, and I'm going to have them in 6th place. Cracking into the top 5 is Atlanta United, where I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this team's ceiling is as high as they want it or as low as they want it. When you spend the most money out of every MLS club, you should be able to field a team full of talent, and Atlanta do this with guys like Miles Robinson, Brooks Lennon, Araujo, and of course the golden boy Thiago Almada. For some reason though, this Atlanta side really struggled over the past few years. Injuries took a toll last year, but now their key guys are back, and they brought in some enticing pieces as well. I'm a big fan of Derek Etienne Jr. coming in free agency, and we'll have to see if their new DP number 9 from Celtic will be what they've been looking for since Joseph Martinez took a step back. The squad looks a little thin in some areas, but no doubt they should be fighting in the upper echelons of the Eastern Conference. In 4th place, I'm backing Orlando City. There's a lot of ways the season could go for Orlando, all depending on if their young stars will take that step up. This offseason, Orlando has been busy in the market. They offloaded 9 players in the offseason, as well as re-signing Mauricio Pereira on a non-DP contract, which allowed Orlando to go out and sign Martin Ojeda from the Argentine League. If it all works out, Ojeda, an attacking winger who had 53 goal contributions in 97 matches, will complement an already loaded attack with the likes of Facundo Torres and Pereira himself. This puts some of the weight off of Facundo Torres, who was the guy for Orlando last season. To really succeed though, 3rd DP Erkin Kara needs to solidify himself in that starting role because his first year in Orlando wasn't anything too special. Past them, I think Orlando holds a steady back line led by Janssen, Antonio Carlos, and Pedro Galese in goal. With a steady foundation and some hopeful firepower up top, Orlando should mount a strong challenge in the East. In the top 3, it's a big call, but I'm taking FC Cincinnati. The question for Cincy this year is, can they build on their success last season, or will they take steps back? And I think the answer to that is that they will take steps back individually, but as a team, they're gonna move forward. I think it's unrealistic to think that Brenner, Acosta, and Vasquez will have as good of a scoring year as last time, but that doesn't mean it'll cost them points. In certain games, Cincy had to score 1,000,000 goals because they conceded 1,000,000 goals. But this year, I'm expecting a much more stable backline, as Salentano will have more experience in that number 1 role, and Matt Miazga will be there from the jump. Therefore, 1 or 2 goals a game should be plenty for Cincinnati to secure 3 points. I've heard other top MLS pundits call Cincinnati at the top of the East, but I'm not going that far. Still though, a home playoff would be well earned in my opinion. Moving on to the runners-up, I selected the New York Red Bulls. If there was one position I'd say the Red Bulls needed to figure out this offseason, it would have been their number 9. All around, this Red Bull team was solid in 2022, except when that ball found its way to Patrick Klimala, it seemed like it never went in. Well, Klimala was shipped off to Israel, and then the Red Bulls brought in not 1, not 2, but 3 signings for that position. First off, the Red Bulls made a big interleague move for Corey Burke from the Union. Then they re-signed Brazilian Elias Manuel, who recorded 3 goal contributions in his only 6 games last season. And finally, to top it off, they broke their record transfer fee by bringing in Dante Van Zier from the Belgian league. If these guys can put away all those chances that Klimala couldn't last year, then I'm going to pick them to fight for the top of the East. Add in Lewis Morgan and Laquinias to the mix, and I think you've got a solid setup in the final third. Then, like Orlando, their back line is solid even after losing Aaron Long. John Tolkien, Sean Nealis, Reyes, and Kyle Duncan have what it takes to keep it together, and if all fails, Carlos Cornell has proven himself many times in the net. And finally, my number 1 spot in the East was actually the first team I put down on paper when I decided this table. It's Philadelphia. It's hard not to believe in a team that has consistently been one of the best clubs in MLS for the past 3 seasons. Jim Curtin is doing unbelievable things for this Union side, who manages to find hidden gems in this league every year. Last season it was Julian Carranza from Miami, and this season they cashed out on the interleague moves by bringing in Andres Pereira from Orlando, super sub Joaquin Torres from Montreal. But even without those signings, this roster is stacked with talent from Andre Blake, Jacob Glesnes, Jack Elliott, and through the midfield with Martinez, Gazdag, and up top with Michael Ura and Carranza. I'd be a fool for not picking them to be top of the East, and actually, Philadelphia is my pick for the Supporters Shield as well. Now we begin to transition over to the West, where I've got St. Louis, rock bottom. It's very difficult to judge expansion sides, especially when most of their key pieces are from outside of the league. But for St. Louis, I'm extra worried on how their inaugural year will play out. What scares me is this designated team tag that they've given themselves. They decided to switch up that typical roster building by selecting only 2 DPs and being pretty adamant that there would not be any more added. Along with that, we expect fast-paced, Red Bull type football from St. Louis, given their coach was brought up through the Red Bull philosophy. Overall, I don't know what to expect, so I figured I'll put them rock bottom, and they can only do better than that. In 13th, I'm going with Houston Dynamo, and this is a club that's really been in limbo for what seems like a few years now. For the second year in a row, Houston's starting under a new manager, which leaves the door open for possibilities. They've done some business over the offseason, but the bulk of their roster is still guys that have failed to make the playoffs for those last 2 seasons. I'm not high on Hector Herrera because I don't think he really adds much either way for the Dynamo. It's a transition year all over again, and that's why I have them this low. Above Houston, I've got Vancouver, who is a team that I typically underrate, but not so much where I feel like I shouldn't have them this low once again. I definitely feel like there's a bit of a small market bias that comes into play here because Vancouver to me is a team that always slides under my radar. From what I know though, their number 9 position is and has always been a struggle. This year they let go of Cavallini, who never really provided consistent numbers, and Brian White is still on and off with injuries. The big offseason rumor for them is signing DP Sergio Cordova after RSL failed to re-sign him, but at the time of making this video, that deal is still left to be done. Other than that, they moved on from a ton of players this offseason while keeping a large part of their core with Kubas, Gressel, and Ryan Gold staying put. I was surprised to see Vanni Sartini make it through 2022, and I think that I may also be surprised if he makes it through this season as well. Just like in the West, from about here to 5th place, I think about every team can and will toe that playoff line. But because I have to rank them, I'm putting Real Salt Lake in 11th. Talk about another team I underrate every single year, but it's hard not to. This RSL team defies odds. I mean, last year they pretty much had no healthy DPs and managed to fight on top of the conference for the first half of the season. If you're an RSL supporter, the lights are a bit brighter this time around. Damir Krylak is hopefully back and hopefully healthy. One of your more prolific wingers is still on the roster in Savarino, and your owners have gone out and spent some actual money bringing in 20-year-old Carlos Gomez on a record fee from Colombia. But now for the bad parts. First off, I'm not positive Andres Gomez will be at his best right away. It seems like a player who will take time to develop. Also, RSL doesn't look like they'll be bolstering their 9th position after letting Cordova run out the rest of his loan. And finally, they've traded Aaron Herrera over to Montreal for what seems like pennies. But to be fair, none of this matters because RSL does what RSL wants. And if they want the playoffs, heck, they'll be there. In 10th, I'm putting a team that was bottom of the West in 2022, the San Jose Earthquakes. I always said that this San Jose team has the quality, and the issue was that they weren't being managed in the right way. Well, hopefully that starts to change as new head coach Luchi Gonzalez takes the wheel for the first time in MLS since managing FC Dallas in 2021. The broad structure of this team looks decent. I mean, Cade Cowell has always had that little flair to him, and Jeremy Abobasi proved his worth last season, scoring 17 goals in 34 games. Then when you move into the midfield, you've got guys like Jamiro Montero, Jackson Ewell, and their new club record signing Carlos Gruezo, who they brought back to MLS after a stint in Germany. Everything from the midfield up I'm happy about, other than I'd wish they have a little bit more depth in those areas. The part I'm worried about is the back line, because in 2022, what we saw was a team that could score a lot, but would also leak goals heavily. Once again, I think there's a solid start here, and I'm sure that they won't be bottom of the West for the 2nd consecutive season. Moving up the table, we have a team that will just make the playoffs, and it's my big call of the West. It's Minnesota United. The reasoning behind this decision is the uncertainty of the whole Emmanuel Reynoso situation. At first it seemed grim, but kind of expected where Reynoso wasn't showing up for the preseason. Then it became real after MLS and Minnesota announced that they were suspending pay to Reynoso because of his unexcused absence from preseason. Word around the league is that the Minnesota front office and coaching staff are not happy whatsoever, which, I mean, why would they be? This team is really nothing without their star playmaker, and that's been pretty evident for the past few years. When Reynoso finds success, Minnesota finds success, and when he's gone, Minnesota really struggles. This side has not seen many improvements from their side last year that just squeaked into the playoffs on the final day, and with a lot of questions in that attack, I'm calling a premature 9th place finish. In 8th, I have Sporting Kansas City, a team that was ravaged by injuries last season, and one that may also suffer some of that fate again. In the weeks before the season, Courtney Ford, one of SKC's few center backs, suffered a ruptured Achilles, which will put him out for the full 2023 season. So I'm sorry, SKC fans, but you just can't catch a break. The bright side is that other than him, your squad's kinda back. Polito is expected to be healthy at the start of the year, but honestly, I wasn't too impressed with him in his first season pre-injury, and I have a hard time thinking he's going to be the guy after that injury. But as backup in competition, you have Willie Agata, a player who tore it up towards the end of last season, and you also have Eric Tommy for the full year as well. Added into the midfield as well is Nemanja Radoja, a Serbian defensive mid who's played the majority of his career in La Liga with Celta Vigo and Levante. It's hard to really pinpoint where this side could be after such an off year in 2022, but I'm sensing a return to the playoffs. In 7th, I've got Colorado, who is actually a team I think have done super well this offseason. One of their big pickups is Kevin Cabral, and he has the potential to rival some of the smartest interleague dealings in this league. There's a possibility that with this change of scenery, Cabral can play like the DP he was supposed to be on a non-DP contract, and if that works, this move was a slam dunk. Along with him, they brought back Cole Bassett from his time in Holland and have even added some Premier League flavor to their midfield with Connor Ronan from Wolves. They've also signed a DP center back, which is something not many teams do. Overall, I think Colorado has improved all over the field, but like many teams, their striker depth lacks. This has always been a problem for Colorado, but in saying so, one year they finished top of the West, and the next year they fell out of the playoffs because of it. So which one are we getting this year? I'm going to think about right in the middle. I'm going 7th place. In 6th, we have the Portland Timbers, and for once, I'm not worried about the age side of the narrative for this team. I'm actually now interested if their young signings are going to be ready to make that big push in year 1. Specifically, I'm looking at their record transfer Avander, an attacking midfielder who came over from FC Michelin in Europe. The word on the street is that he's good, and according to Matt Doyle, he's potentially Hani Mukhtar good, which, if that's a sign for anything, sounds like Portland got themselves a steal. Along with him, it'll also be interesting to see how Santiago Moreno develops in this team and where the relationship between Eric Williamson and head coach Giovanni Savarese goes. We left off last year when on decision day, Williamson was dropped for unknown reasons, and their loss in that match led to Portland missing out on the playoffs for the first time since 2016. I expect Williamson to be a key cog in that midfield, along with ageless wonder Diego Chara, so for Portland's sake, I'm hoping things have smoothed over. Moving into the top 5, I have FC Dallas, who have done well getting themselves back into the playoff picture since missing out in 2021. I think the core of Dallas is really strong. Last season, their midfield clicked perfectly towards the end of the year with a healthy Paxton Pomykal, a fresh Sebastian Lletget, and Quignon. Along with that, their attack has some exciting pieces in the mix of youth and experience. Alan Velasco is heading into year 2. Paul Arriola came through last season, as well as Jesus Ferreira, who, say what you want about him, but there's no denying his presence in this team. I'd be surprised if he hits the 18 goal mark again this season, but I am confident he'll still be effective. Keep an eye on that back line though, because although they had the best defense in the West last year, they've let go of a key part of that center back duo in Matt Hedges. As replacement, they brought in LAFC's Ibiaga, but it definitely feels like a big downgrade. In the top 4, I have the LA Galaxy, in which I'm predicting them to match their finish last season. It's been a slow rebuild for Greg Vanney since taking over, but I always expected it to be like this, and now I think the Galaxy team could be ready to have a really strong run this season. Spearheading this notion for them is a full season with Ricky Puig. After he came in last season, you could instantly see how he benefited this Galaxy side, and I think a striker like Chicharito can easily inflate his scoring numbers with Puig in the squad. Along with him though, people are expecting super sub Dejan Joveljic to get a lot more first team minutes this season, which could come with the Galaxy formation changing to 2 up top. Another reason this change may be imminent is the fact that they've traded out most of their wingers, with Grandsir leaving for France and Cabral off to Colorado. Meanwhile, Douglas Costa remains in the squad and remains a bit of a flop. We're yet to really see how this all could play out, but I think in the end, the Galaxy will definitely be in the playoffs. In third place, I'm putting Austin, and no, Austin fans, this year you cannot laminate anyone's predictions and you can't say nobody believed in you, because this time around, you have expectations. Last year, Josh Wolf's style of play really came through, with Austin playing some of the most entertaining football in the league. Obviously, the crux of the squad was Sebastian Driussi, who picked up 22 goals and 7 assists last year. The question is, after he penned a new deal to make him one of the highest paid players in MLS, will he sustain that level or drop off? For me, to be honest, I think he can keep those numbers up, especially after Austin have gone out and signed some real veteran strikers who are known for being deadly in the box. Although Gyasi Zardes may not be in his prime anymore, I still back him if a team can provide the services he needs. Along with that, last season we saw a load of players raise their level, from Fagundes to Finley, through their midfield with Alex Ring and all the way down to Brad Stuver. It's up to Austin to fulfill expectations this year and show that last year was not a fluke. In second place, I have a bold pick, and it's the Seattle Sounders to rise from the depths of the West and reclaim their title as one of the best teams in MLS. Last season, I have no clue what happened. The Sounders were so dangerous in the CCL, but it seemed like that took out all their bite. After winning that competition, Seattle just walked through the rest of the season and finished outside of the playoffs for the first time ever. This year, I'm expecting a revenge story where these players come out and show who they really are and capture that pre-2022 form. The main pieces are still here: Christian Roldan, Ladero, Stefan Fry, Rui Diaz, and they even have João Paulo back from his injury, which gives Seattle a bit more life. They'll be relying on a lot of young players this year, but it's Seattle's youth. They know how to bring players up. Reagan looks ready to take that starting spot, and I'll say I think it's time for Seattle to move on from Jordan Morris and give guys like Leo Chu a bit more playtime. And finally, in first place, you've guessed it, I have LAFC. Now this could backfire, but I'm going with the grain here. It could be unrealistic for LAFC to top the West for the second consecutive year, but I still really like their roster. They brought in one of the better MLS center backs with Aaron Long, who I know gets a bad rep, but he'll be solid for them. Along with that, their midfield core has remained intact with MLS experience in Ilya Sanchez and Kellen Acosta, as well as somehow keeping a hold of Cifuentes. The big question mark though is that number 9 position. For some reason, even after all his goals, LAFC never really wanted Chicho Arango and decided to sell him off to Pachuca for $6 million. Now we're waiting to see if they sign a new striker or roll with what they have. There's rumors of Aubameyang coming in from Chelsea, but it seems like those talks have died off a little bit. I think they will find somebody, if not now, then in the summer. But at what level? Still though, with Dennis Bouanga and Carlos Vela, I think this team will be fine on the scoring front. And that wraps up my 2023 MLS predictions. With 29 teams now, there's no way I get this order correct, but hopefully I didn't embarrass myself. The season starts this week, so get ready and feel free to leave some of your own predictions in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I know it was a long one, and I'll see you guys next time.